So welcome, everybody. So we did receive some feedback as we were advertising this session that there were some folks who couldn't come in person and they'd like the opportunity to participate virtually, as well as thought there might be value to have something they could refer to afterwards if they couldn't attend the session at all. So we understand that nomination period can be a bit of a in-between time. So if you're not comfortable speaking into the mics for our session, just feel free to ask at the table without cueing your mic, and we can recite the question and answer it just for the value of the recording afterwards. We don't have the camera activated, so at this point it's just audio in the presentation that would be part of the recording. But thanks for joining us. We thought we'd do a little bit of a roundtable first, if you feel comfortable doing so, so that you know who we are, and if you want to share who you are, you're welcome to do that. And then we'll go through the agenda. So I'm Jaylene McIver. I'm the Deputy CAO and Corporate Officer for the municipality.
Hi, I'm Alicia Gregory. I'm the Deputy Chief Elections Officer.
Lorraine Gerwing, Deputy Mayor.
Elaine Fellers, Deputy Corporate Manager.
I'm Bryn Eggers. I'm a local citizen.
I'm Melinda Bello, just a local citizen as well.
Brenda Enox on council for the NRRM.
Kimmy Glinsky.
And hi, I'm Scott Berry, the CEO of the municipality.
And for anyone attending online, if you'd like to speak or ask questions or participate that way, feel free to do the raise hand feature, and Alicia will cue your audio so that you can participate that way. So onto the agenda. So we've laid out a bit of a presentation for you, but we wanted it to be a dialogue as much as possible, because this is also for your benefit and we can only anticipate so many questions. So at any point, feel free to chime in and ask a question, or if you're more comfortable saving it up to the end, go for it that way too. So first is, sorry, Alicia, thank you. So first we thought we'd do what we just did. The next part of the day, we thought we'd talk about what local government does and how local elected officials fit into that picture. And just around a good understanding of those roles, I think will help form really effective leadership moving forward. We want to talk about what it means to be an effective leader, the decision-making process, how to make informed decisions, and then the governance model as well. We want to talk about some things to consider before running for office, and ensuring that you're fully prepared for the journey of being an elected official. Alicia is going to walk us through the nomination packages, how to submit them, and then obviously open the floor to questions and answers if there's any thing that doesn't come up through the course of the presentation. So yeah, so let's get started. So we thought that we'd kind of pose these two questions to the group and get some of your feedback and some of your thoughts, and then share what we've come to learn as much as we can. It's an ever evolving learning experience for sure, but yeah, so open it up to you guys. Why do you believe local governments exist? So if you're comfortable speaking for the recording, cue your mic. Otherwise, you're welcome to just say it at the table.
Well, somebody has to guide the town in the direction that they want to go.
Yeah.
Right. Give direction to staff and make sure that residents' voices are being heard, and that the things that the resident wants are trying to get.
Perfect.
Something on that.
Yep. Any other thoughts?
Because the province mandates that there be local government.
Technically speaking, yes.
And a common belief is that local government is responsible for roads, water, and sewer. I think that that's mandated, you have to be responsible for those things. And then outside of that, that's where I believe individual counselors bring forth the issues of the community, the strategic direction of the community. So, yeah.
Perfect. I've heard it described that local governments are the level of government closest to the people. So often we find ourselves taking on things that are other governments' responsibilities because those are the most critical needs in the community. So to Deputy Mayor Gerwing's point, there's traditional services that governments deliver, which are the less kind of fancy ones, but the most critical in keeping, safe, sanitary places to live. But certainly communities continue to find themselves assuming levels of service and other services that are less traditional for local governments.
Yeah, I think beside it is mandated to have local government, and as a local government, we're an arm of the province, basically. So there's what's that? Well, one-way communication sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, so what it does though is it provides, and Kim touched on it there also, is that provides that local decision-making ability in the community, especially around areas that for services for community members that are a priority to that community. So there's essential services around water and sewer and roads, transportation, things of those things, fire. But there's also then the desired services that aren't mandated or required, but make a community livable. So we'll pick on the rec center, for example. Like the rec center is not a required service for local government, but local governments provide it because it helps to be to have that livable community, right? To attract people to community, keep people in community, things of that nature. And then any aspiring things that might occur in the community or wishes of the community, right? I've said to councils in the past, what service do you want to provide and what are you willing to pay for it, or what's the community willing to pay for it? And that's where that balance and that representation comes in terms of the voices around this table. The intent is to support and the will of and the wishes of the community. Okay. In BC, we have two different types of, I guess, local governments. One for municipalities, towns, cities, and that. And then the rural areas, because BC is kind of unique in terms of having not all provinces have that same governance layout when it comes to local governments and local elected officials. BC, we have the municipal government per se, which is your typical cities and towns and whatnot, and then you have the regional district, which is usually looks after the rural areas. We are a combination of both. In theory, we're just a different word for regional district, but as a regional municipality, we are the only regional municipality in British Columbia. Gives us the ability to dip our feet into legislation on both sides of the fence. But the neat thing is that we're the only organization, the only local government in BC that has a single governing body that governs the size of this municipality, being about 85,000 square kilometers. Second largest in BC from a physical geographic size. Peace River Regional District is just a hair larger than us at 100,000 square kilometers. But within the PRD, as a regional district, you've got the city of Fort St. John, the city of Dawson Creek, the district of Tumbler Ridge, et cetera, and all these various local governments and as decision makers within their areas, and then representatives on the regional district as directors. So around this table, 6 councillors and a mayor govern it all. So the only regional municipality in BC like this. Any questions? Any thoughts? No.
So I guess turning that, knowing what we do as a organization. Oh, I'm sorry. I got the Kim affliction here, forgetting to cue my mic. Yeah, so knowing what we do as an organization, what are some of the thoughts about what the local elected officials do in their roles to lead that? I think, well, yeah, you spoke to some being setting a strategic priority and vision for the community, but it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, I mean, especially around strategic planning. And then ensuring, I think one of the biggest roles of a local councillor is ensuring that the representation of the local government is what the communities want. You know, like it isn't staff driven, it isn't mayor driven. It's our responsibility to ensure that we are representing our communities, not ourselves, not an individual interest, not a business, but it's to ensure that we are representing what our communities want and need. And so we do that through our portfolio assignments, which I think we'll get to further on down. But so as somebody that's interested in running, you can bring your own passions, your own things that you want to get done through, and you can do that through your portfolio assignments, as well as being actively engaged around the council table.
And I think one of the things that we see where that can be challenging to navigate, especially around budget time, because there's always going to be voices from the community that express what they want to see in terms of maybe enhanced services or different services. But then there's also an equal amount of voice from the community around affordability of those things and what the financial reality of delivering all that looks like. So that's one of council's major challenges, is maintaining things over time based on the financial realities of the community and the organization and the tax base, with just wanting to ensure that the needs of the community in terms of what their expectations for those services are can be maintained over time. One of the other things that, and those are all within council's control, but there's plenty of things that, the community expresses that are well outside local government's control. And I think the other important role that local elected officials play is around advocacy and lobbying and forming partnerships to advance those things that may not be within the direct control of our own local government. So, that's demonstrated through attending conferences and writing letters to ministers and things like that. But it's, I think, amplifying the voice of the community through that elected official role to try to move the needle on things that we don't directly control.
Yeah, I think a really good example of that is all of the work that this council and previous council has done around the health file. Like, local government is not responsible for any area of health. Like, it's not mandated that we provide or lobby for, or that's totally outside of our realm of responsibility. But this council and previous councils have spent a whole lot of financial capacity as well as human capacity to ensure that we have the best healthcare systems that we can have, that we should have equitable, humane, I'm added a new word, people, equitable, humane access to healthcare services. But not all local governments do that, right? Like, not all communities put their money where their mouth is, but I think we've heard loud and clear that our communities would like us to do that. And so I believe that this and past councils have really risen to that occasion. And I would go so far as to say that we are known far and wide for our advocacy work and what we have done around the healthcare file as a community, as our communities, for sure.
Any thoughts or questions at this stage.
I was just gonna throw out what sticks with me from the very beginning of our term when we had the workshop with Christy Benty. She said, worry about, a lot of the residents don't understand what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. We advocate hard for everything that's important to the residents. And one thing that sticks to me from that workshop is worry about the things you have control of. And the stuff that you don't have control of, just let go, because you have no control. And you got to remind yourself that, especially talking to residents when they come to you and, you know, they're upset with a certain situation, whether it's the RCMP or the school board, or there's things that we can control as local government. And there's so many things that we have no control over. We can advocate, and that's all we can do.
Okay, so we thought this next slide might be a bit helpful as we talk about what we can control and what we can just lobby and advocate for. So this is something we usually bring to our trade shows, and we found it to be a pretty helpful communication piece. So I'm apologizing now if you've seen this before, but nonetheless, sometimes it's good even for those of us who work in local government to take a look and remember what is not within our realm of responsibility. But as Scott mentioned, we are creatures of the province, and so given our unique governance structure, unique legal structure, we kind of play in both sandboxes of the Community Charter and the Local Government Act, and that sets the framework in terms of essentially what we're legislated and allowed to do and what we are prohibited from doing. So obviously there's the 3 levels here. We've simplified this for our own purposes. In other communities use a similar demonstration, and they have municipal and regional districts, but we've combined it because we do both. So there's some really familiar local services that you'll see there around community grant programs, obviously rec, fire, community and rural planning and development, the cemeteries, mosquito and invasive plant management. It's the things that you see in your daily life that you experience directly, and then a whole lot more. So these are, I didn't put anything about health services on there. That's entirely my bad. Maybe because it's a non-traditional service that we do deliver. But in addition to that big long blue cube, we also have many health recruitment activities that are going on between providing housing and incentives to attract health professionals. And to Deputy Mayor Gerwing's point, those are things that are outside of normal realm, but things that council have established over time because they do see the positive benefit of doing so. And I should mention that intentionally fill a gap that was identified in terms of things that would set Fort Nelson apart from other communities when health professionals were considering the many, many postings that are out there in that sector. And then provincial and federal government. So this is a good point of reference when I think, residents and constituents are talking to elected officials about things that frustrate them, and whether that's, where we can help directly or things that we can do versus where we need to refer people elsewhere to kind of see some progress and things that they want to see difference made in. So back to kind of our rule book. So the Charter and the Local Government Act. If you've looked into the elections process, that whole process is spelled out within those 2 pieces of legislation. So we don't invent that. It's the province's invention, and we are following the rules on that. Those 2 pieces of legislation give us the ability to adopt our own bylaws and set governance for our own communities in certain areas. They require us in some cases, as we mentioned, to operate certain services and give us the authority by bylaw to operate others. They require certain things like different reports, an annual report, which talks about what we do and our financial status every year. But it also requires us to do things that can be very time consuming and costly, which is housing needs assessments, official community plans, things like that. And a new introduction to that legislation this year will be a requirement for a code of conduct. So we began the process this year of developing one for council, and then the province came through to say that they will have a prescribed code of conduct that must be adopted with the fall election. So they definitely impose certain rules. That one in particular will have language around conflict of interest, responsible conduct, and then actually have prescribed sanctions if there's non-compliance with the code, which is something that councils across BC have struggled with for many years. And so the province has taken a really much more firmer stand on how local governments will deal with that moving forward.
Okay,
Yeah.
can I just ask a question or do you want us to wait?
No, go for it.
So in terms of that code of conduct, will that cover things like attendance? Or is it, just more of a broader overall umbrella? One of the things that I've noticed, in a couple of terms, but specifically this last one is attendance is not very good.
Mhm.
By some, sorry, you're right. And that affects, of course, that affects everybody.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's, to me, really, really important because it seems you only have a fraction of your council doing the work of everyone. And for me, considering, running,
Mhm.
that is a really big factor because I would be committed, but it doesn't seem fair that, you're committed and two other people are not.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering if those types of things were going to be covered in that,
In the code?
in the code of conduct, or if that's more of an internal thing.
So it's a bit of a blend of things. So the charter already has provisions in place around attendance. So if you miss 4 consecutive meetings or 60 days, whichever is longer, then you you would be disqualified from office. So that's not to say, and I think we'll get to it in the presentation too, around, the expectation of time and what the actual commitment of time will look like. So that's regular meetings. So to assume that the only meetings to be attended are regular meetings is, I think, a little bit of a false understanding because it's exponentially more than that. We try as staff our best to cluster meetings so that we're not expecting counselors to give up an infinite amount of their personal time to attend meetings. So we do try to cluster the meetings so that they're occurring on the same day as a scheduled meeting, regular meeting, or at least to the best of everybody's availability. But I think, currently in the charter, it is just regular scheduled meetings is the minimum expectation. But that could mean that a person doesn't attend any others. And you're right, that creates a bit of, and I think it's a disservice to the person because how do you remain informed or actively participate when you're not there? So, and having the contribution of all of those folks at the table, it provides for better decision making. Other than it's the same handful of folks that are always there, always weighing in. You miss out on the contributions of those who can't be there. So there's many reasons, obviously, why people aren't present, and there's provisions for certain things like medical leaves of absence and so on and so forth. But yeah, the consistent attendance is one thing. I don't believe that the code of conduct will specifically address attendance, but there will be things around active participation and respectful participation, and it is intended to be a guideline, and it's more or less to provide an objective set of sanctions for non-compliance. Because that's the other thing, is that local governments were taking their own approaches, and some were very heavy-handed, probably based on past experience, and others maybe their punitive measures were not as effective in trying to curtail bad behavior. But so this, I think that's mostly the intent of this prescribed code of conduct, is to have objective sanctions for non-compliance.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question with this slide. I'm looking up there and I don't see anything about safety. Like RCMP presence or whether it's local policing or whatever. I don't see anything up there. So who's responsible for that?
So depending on the size of the community, so because we're under 5,000, that's a provincial
Okay.
requirement. So they're responsible. We have input. The RCMP provide reports to us and to council, and we have input around what community priorities would look like. But in terms of the responsibility, in terms of directing and how many and who pays, the province looks after that.
Okay.
Good question, though. Yeah.
Thank you. Note to revise the slide.
I just want to add something to the attendance. So all 3 of my terms, so 12 years, attendance has been an issue. So on all the terms for various different reasons. I myself have had to take a 3-month leave of absence due to family health issues. So I was out of the community for 3 months, but attended via telephone at that time. But I would not have been around the council table. So it does happen. So yeah, it becomes really complicated.
I'll add, like, I think your question came around the code of conduct. I mean, there can be, I'll call it motherhood statements that talk about the importance of participation and whatnot in meetings. But the act is very clear in terms of what you can do or can't do in terms of the length of meetings that Jay mentioned with the 4 missed meetings or 60 days, whichever is longer from a disqualification perspective. But there's other discussions that we've had at the table around different options that council has within their power in terms of procedure bylaw, in terms of what certain expectations. We can't supersede obviously the act. We can't say, oh, we're going to change it to 2 meetings or 30 days. But also the other component could be remuneration, right? The remuneration piece is something that's been discussed a lot. It's a delicate subject for council because they discuss how they remunerate themselves. And a lot of times council wish to make decisions that don't impact them today, but future councils. But given the amount of the dialogue and discussions that's occurred around the attendance component, you can attach remuneration directly to attendance, right? Where you have, some things that have been discussed is because currently it's a flat remuneration, a flat stipend for the councillors and for the mayor. And it doesn't, as long as you hold that seat, that stipend exists. But there can be things attached to it where you have, for example, a base stipend. Some organizations will have a base stipend, so you'll have a base remuneration, and then there will be remuneration attached or compensation attached to additional meetings. If you're attending, even doesn't have to be council meetings. Some have where they attend because of portfolios. They'll be attending board meetings of other agencies or organizations, and depending on the length of time and how much you put in, there's different formulas. But there's different mechanisms too that can help or assist the attendance piece too, for sure. Because right now, outside of that, I'll call it willingness to come and participate, there isn't that other mechanism that outside of the act that provides the teeth, for lack of better words.
And before we move off this slide, I just want to recognize that this doesn't reflect kind of the complete community in terms of the organizations that deliver the wide range of services. So RCMP is a really good example. I think the other is just recognizing that not-for-profits, Indigenous governments, the school boards, the health authorities, residents individually, it's all to have a complete community. It's a very tightly connected web of organizations that deliver services, and no one agency can do it all. And so staying closely connected with all of those different parties and sharing, what you're hearing from residents and learning from those organizations as well is really important to make sure that where we can do things differently or better in our own organizations and vice versa. Something to keep in mind. I didn't want to lose sight of this is it. This is all. There's a much bigger picture out there.
You brought up the RCMP as an example. A significant amount of time a couple of years ago was put into advocating and working with the local members in the absence of having some leadership locally, and the activities that are occurring with arsons and whatnot. So a lot of work went into at this level, at the local level, working with higher level of levels within the RCMP, the agency themselves, E division and provincially, and then with the public safety minister and solicitor general to outline and to communicate and discuss the concerns locally that were occurring from a policing perspective. So it's just to Jay's point, it's not like we don't have anything to do. It's just we're not directly responsible over it, which then can create frustrations at the local level because, again, it's, and as Brenda had mentioned, or Councillor Enax mentioned, we don't have direct control over it. So we can only influence the outcome. We don't have direct control over the outcome, right? And you can put a lot of effort into things and not necessarily get the desired outcome. But the relationships are there. And we try to maintain those relationships, especially given our location, because we are far away from everything, from any other resources showing up, right? If it's police, fire, emergency, ambulance, you name it, right? Everyone who's been in the community any length of time and understands the community understands some of the challenges that we have given our remote location.
Good, thank you. So we thought we might go through this as an interview. With Deputy Mayor Gerwing. So teach us, what does it mean to you to lead effectively?
So this is just from my perspective, right? So it's not like I'm not quoting any book learned kind of thing. I'm just speaking from my own perspective and from my own experience. So as I was thinking about this, absolutely number one is relationships. It's relationships with your community, it's relationships with staff, and it's relationships around the table. Like you need to be building those bridges to get anything done. I'll just remind everybody, if you're elected, it's one vote. You have one vote. So if you're not building those relationships, then how are you going to be effective with one vote? You're not going to, right? And then secondly, it's listening. And listening very carefully, right? It's I speaking in my own voice, like I already know, right? So how am I going to listen to somebody else when I've already made up my mind that I already know? So that was a shift for me, is to figure out how to effectively listen to somebody else's perspective when I've already made up my mind. So then I had to shift to, well, Lorraine, stop making up your mind ahead of time. It seems simple, right? But I found that to be difficult and took a lot of practice to do that. And then figuring out how to work collaboratively, right? Again, you're one vote, and not that you're going to stack the outcome of any one decision, but when we were working on our recruitment and retention plan, that took relationships with staff, with council, with our contractor. And that really highlighted for me how we really need to work collaboratively, working together. Any one person, I think, is not going to have the answer that's necessarily going to work for the community. It's got to be all voices coming together and then figuring out how we can move that file forward. And then another thing is figuring out a way to work with people that you may not like and you may not respect. But you've got 4 years together, so you got to figure out how to do that, and I'm the type of person that everything shows on my face. Sometimes I'll get a text from Scott and he'll say face. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so right. It's like, it's just a natural thing. I don't do it intentionally, but I'm happy, you know it. I'm sad, you'll know it. I'm mad, you'll know it. And that's not always productive, right? So that was a learning for me as well. And then figuring out a way to make difficult decisions. Or are we on? Oh, we're on decision making. Sorry. Do you want me to just keep going, or any questions on what does it mean to lead effectively? Or
I was just going to note that we do have some tools. So council has some tools to help them through that process of leading effectively and collaboration. And it will probably feel really foreign and uncomfortable in the first few meetings. But one of council's initial tasks when they're newly elected is to sit down with their procedure bylaw. And basically, it's a rule book on how to run their meetings. So what they'll, the order in which things will appear, so that everybody knows that they're singing from the same song sheet in terms of what items are in front of them at a meeting, how they make motions and engage in debate, and that can be a consistent process. And it seems it might feel awkward, but over time it becomes natural. And then it also helps to, I think, create some order in how those conversations take place so that you can temper your natural reaction to certain things, and you can give that space is given as part of the meeting to listen to what others have to contribute. And then there's rules of order in the meetings and things like that. And it's a tool that's there for council to kind of, I think, help navigate that process of leading effectively through the meetings that are taking place.
great point, which, I mean, what I took out of that is the consistency, right? So one of the procedure bylaws is you can only speak to an item, I don't know, is it twice or how many times or whatever? You're only allowed to talk 2 times on it, and the mayor's constantly calling me on that. And I'm like, I don't know, 12 years later, I still don't get that one. But I mean, it makes sense, right? You don't want one person dominating the conversation for sure. But yeah, but you need to be consistent, right? You need to be doing it all of the time. So that was my note here. It's like, so decision making is be consistent, right? You'll have a situation that is before you and you have to make a decision on it. And then a year later, you'll have that exact same situation, or could have that exact same situation before you, but it's a different person or a different business or a different something. Be consistent, right? And if you're not going to be consistent, know why you're not being consistent. So that is really important to me. It's just counterproductive to vote one way and then without good reason, just changing it a year later or however long it happened to be. And be open to new learning, like you're going to have so much information before you over your 4 years. And you need to somehow figure out how to be open to all of that information. And then something I really wanted to highlight too is like, you're going to screw up. Like we all do, right? I have any number of times. And my advice to you is that when you do, because you will, like, just own it, like you have to own it. Apologize, move on. You got to take responsibility for when you've screwed up. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say about.
I just want to add one thing you started to say about the difficult decisions. You really have to remove your personal relationships. Friends tend to think you should vote their way because you're friends. And at times you probably lose a friend or two because of the way you voted. Just, in those difficult decisions, it's happened a couple times. Just so you know.
I was going to say, when you're talking decisions also, I mean, it's important it's important to understand what the role of council is and that role of staff is. Like as staff, we don't make decisions actually. We don't make decisions at this table. Our role as staff is to support council, help council make an informed decision. So when those administrative reports come to council, we do what we can to strip out any bias, and just provide factual information and do what we can to provide as much information for council to make an informed decision. As staff, we don't make that decision. We might make a recommendation, or we might say, you can't make a decision this way because it might not be legal, right? Or we should get some legal advice. But we're not the decision makers at the table. Council are the decision makers, are the policy makers. And as staff, our role is to support that and provide the support and direct and as we move forward, I've used words with council that, you know, you steer the ship in the direction you want to go from your strategic priorities, your visions, your direction. We row, right? And the goal is that we do that collaboratively. I've been with the organization now for 18, 19 years. In this role for 9, I witnessed early in my tenure prior to this role where that necessarily wasn't the case at times. Sometimes there'd be influence in the reports that would go to council, and you can see that at the table and how council reacted. And then the public sees that, and then you're not, as an organization, functioning that well. And I think Kim could probably speak to some of that in the past. One of the goals I had when I took on this role in the organization was to ensure that as council, they understood their role. And as staff, we understood our role because we had the part to play and we had to pull up our socks also. And that the information that we provided to council was strictly factual information without bias that helped council make an informed decision. And sometimes they're tough decisions that we would support either way. And as a CAO, my role would be to support council in that. But it's important because sometimes it's a misconception out in the public that staff are here making these decisions and we're not. That's one of the important functions of as an elected official, extremely important. That sometimes is misunderstood, and those decisions at times don't necessarily influence the now. They influence future activities, right? A lot of times in your role, I've seen it. You know, new councillors come in, they want to change everything and change the world right now, but then realize, oh, you have no control over this, or you have no control over that. And I'll pick on the previous mayor, like Mayor Foster, when he came into the role fairly new, and he thought like the mayor had all these powers. And he finally came in my office one day and he said, "I don't have all this power." And I said, "No, you're just a single. You're
one vote.
You're one vote. The mayor does have elevated powers within their role, but in terms of decision making, they're one vote. They have no more influence over the other councillors." And sometimes you'll see that on the TV shows where you'll see the mayor of some U.S. Directing the sheriff to go do this and lock these people up. But it's an important piece because it's I find that's one of the bigger learnings when new elected officials come to the table is really what you actually have control over and what our role is as staff. The other piece of it is that as the CAO is the only employee of council. Then the other employees report to the CAO. So the role of the CAO is to essentially take the strategic priorities of council, the visions, the direction, the decisions they've made, and then with the employees that we have, or I have, within the departments and the way the structure is to have that be, for lack of better words, executed. Like this is to be able to deliver that, and the success of that or the failure of that is also the relationship that the CAO has with their council, right? Because for me, I'm not a politician, but I do have to stand. I do play on both sides of the fence sometimes. I have to understand the political will, the political noise, the political influence, for lack of better words, but then operationalize that. And then the operational component is up to me, which means I'm solely accountable. Council don't come in and say to some director, "Why didn't you do this?" or "How come?" Why? It's through me or through the CAO. And essentially it's called the one employee model. It's not a requirement in BC or with local governments, but it is outlined in the act, not as a requirement, but supported from a delegation of authority perspective. And what it does, it helps not necessarily helps with not blurring the lines, for lack of better words, and helps with structure in the organization. So any any communication that may happen to not that a counselor can't have a conversation with a staff member, but their role is not to provide direction. It's not to come after a meeting and the decision's been made in a meeting and say, okay, now, Josh, we want to change accessibility out there in the public and start painting these lines and doing this and changing all this. That is my role and director's role. If council is not in favor of how that's been done, then they have a problem with me, or with the CAO. What it also does, it helps with the decision-making process internally in terms of how we execute something. Because I might ask council at times, like, how important is this? Or from a priority perspective, like, we have I said, council's heard this many a times. We don't have empty spots on our plates. Our plates are full. So if we're adding something to it, something has to stop or something might get delayed. That might be a dialogue I have with council to help understand where, or help them understand what impacts a certain decision might be if there's some new undertaking, a new initiative that occurs, right? Or how do we get additional resources? And it's been, that relationship with council over the past couple of terms and how the understanding between the roles within at this table has really helped collaboratively on how we deliver services. Because we know what parts we have to play. And sometimes it's a bit of a misconception out there too in the public in terms of, or for new elected officials that come to the table, right? And the job for me then is, or the CAO then, is to help mitigate the confusion, which, if you can imagine, if you had 7 elected officials start going and providing direction to the staff internally, they're going to get pulled in every which way direction, especially if a certain activity is more from a passion perspective, as Deputy Mayor Gerwing said, they have a certain council or elected official has more passion for something than someone else on council. It could create confusion internally. So that's the other one of the big reasons for having that single employee model when it comes to local government.
Yeah, great point, Scott. I just wanted to go back to the decision making because I forgot to mention to be prepared. You may think that nobody can tell that you didn't read the report, but
you'll say something out loud.
It's pretty evident. So, read the reports, and somewhere along here it comes out. There is a lot of reading. So there is a lot of reading, and it's, in my opinion, it's disrespectful to staff and it's disrespectful to council themselves if you are, first of all, at a meeting where you're not prepared. So please be prepared. And sometimes I have actually seen a mayor actually that said, I'm not prepared. I'm sorry. Whatever happened, and I'm not prepared. And so then that item becomes deferred. I would much prefer that than to have somebody floating through, because every opinion is so important. So if you're thinking about it, please make sure that you have enough time to be prepared. That is just so important. And then other thing I wanted to share is around all of the different perspectives. So what I have found really successful halfway through my last term and this term is I created focus groups, and they're not my friends, and they're not staff, and they're not fellow council people. But you know what? I don't know anything about whatever, picking transportation. Let's just pick that. So if I'm faced with a decision involving transportation, well, what do I know? So I go to my focus group, and again, they're not my friends. They're people in that industry that have the knowledge. So over those years, I have built relationships with a pile of different people that I never knew before. And I get their perspective on things to help me, first of all, sometimes to understand it better, but also what does that look like from their reality? And I have found that to be hugely beneficial. So I just wanted to add those things.
We chatted a bit about good governance. Was there anything, Deputy Mayor Gerwing, that you wanted to add to some of Scott's points about at least the operational model and how that supports good governance?
Yeah, I can't say I'm always a fan of the one employee. I totally understand it, and I think that that is a model that should continue. Absolutely. It is very difficult, though. It's like you're at the grill fest on the weekend and, there's no toilet paper in the washroom and you see staff that are not working and you want to go up there and say like, we need some toilet paper, right? But like, that's not fair. It's not fair to staff, right? So, I believe in the model. It is a lot harder to honor that model than I would have ever thought possible. But I mean, and it depends on your CAO. I think we're really lucky. And Scott, unfortunately, I have texted him at all kinds of odd hours. With a variety of issues, and I've always had access to that information. I don't know what it's going to look like with the new CAO. So how that's all going to play out, I don't know. But I have to say that, if we, again, I believe in the model, but I think the model is only going to work if you have a CAO that firmly believes in those lines of communication with their council are open pretty much all of the time, because like we're being bombarded with issues at like all times of the day and night. And I think we try to be really respectful. Like I'll send the CAO or Jaylene, and I'll send an email when I don't need an immediate answer, and I'll go low priority or do not read until Monday. But I think that model only works is if that CAO has got those open lines of communication with their council.
For the record, it would have been fine if you said we need toilet paper in the washroom. That's a little bit different than go change your operational plan this week to go do X. I'd like to add to what you said. I mean, I think, and this is where it's that two-way street, that relationship piece. One of the things that we've really focused on, right, over the years is really the importance of that relationship and what works. I mean, I have some counselors, for one, Brenda, we chat lots, that it's important to provide that support to and be available, right? And that said, the staff understand, especially when you look at the directors and how they communicate with their teams, the importance of supporting council, right? Our role is to do what we can to protect you. You're with all due respect, elected officials get in based on the support they have from the community and how popular you are. It's not necessarily, for some, how much you know about a certain object or a certain thing or a certain item or a certain activity. As staff, we're the ones that try to provide that information. That's what our role as administration is, to do what we can to get you up to speed on a certain activity, especially when a new council comes in and there's an initiative that's carried in from one council to the other. A council may wish to say, well, we don't want to do this. We're done, and stop it cold. I mean, that's happened in the past. Or they might want to up the ante, but then it's also the education piece in terms of what's occurred in the past, what's been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And can't say enough about the importance of that relationship component between not just the CAO and council, but also what the staff do to help support council. As a CAO, I mean, I say many a times, and my staff has heard it, I'm not good at one single item anymore, because I just touch all these little things in the run of a day and over the run of a week. I depend on that staff to come forward because they're the resident experts on specific topics, right? Jay's here speaking to things on the administrative side from a corporate service perspective that she's forgotten more than I know today, quite frankly, right? But that said, that's a compliment. But as a team, collectively, we're there to support council, right? Our goal is not to have you walk into a room and feel like a fish out of water, or to feel like you're not prepared. But again, to Deputy Mayor's point, prepared also means there's a commitment. And I know there's a slide coming up here to discuss what that commitment is. It does take time. It does take a commitment, because there is reading and information. It's one thing for us to, it's the old lead the horse to water. We can provide the information, but we can't force you to read it. And I'll say from experience, yes, you can absolutely tell when someone comes in the room and they're not prepared. We don't flag it and whatnot, and we try to provide the appropriate dialogue, but sometimes it sticks out and someone comes in and they're not prepared for a certain discussion. And we've had situations where I think it's the appropriate approach. Someone said, I didn't get a chance to spend the time in this as I'd hoped. I either request that we defer it, or I can't make a informed decision or judgment on it because I'm not prepared today. Right.
That's another thing. I didn't even think about that till just now. As a council person, you are not allowed to abstain on a vote. So you vote yay or nay. So there's no abstentions. So you don't get off the hook of just deciding that you're not going to vote. So.
And I think along with everything everybody else has said already, flexibility is a big thing. If you have the flexibility to leave, if you have a full-time job, at a special meeting or something, that is an added bonus for sure.
Any questions or other comments before we carry on? And nothing online. Okay. So what does that look like in the concept of time? So some of the things that will occur in a counselor's term. So obviously council meetings, we chatted a little bit about that. The regular meetings being the ones that count towards kind of your tally for potential disqualification. But there's also special meetings where other decisions are made. We have committee of the whole meetings, which provide a slightly more informal format to allow for open dialogue versus, firm decision making. There's also, so I'm not sure, we didn't touch on it earlier, but in addition to being the elected officials for the Northern Rockies, our mayor and council also serve as the chair and directors for the regional hospital district board. So that's another kind of set of meetings. Again, we try to cluster them so that we're not calling people into council chambers on too many occasions, more than we need to, but there's those. In addition, as now a representative of the community being elected, you'll probably be attending more public events, public engagement opportunities. So it's become very important to past councils, and I expect councils moving forward that public engagement is a priority. So part of the informed decision-making process is knowing that the community as a whole, or whoever turns up to engage, supports what we're doing. So, and provides input so that what we do, it reflects what is wanted or needed in the community. So those can take up a certain amount of time on an ongoing basis. There's also meetings that we attend outside of these chambers with neighboring nations. So we're trying to achieve quarterly meetings with our neighbors at Fort Nelson First Nation and Prophet River First Nation. And when we can get further up to Lower Post as well with the Daily Dene. Folks come in they have an audience with council who might be looking at potentially investing in the community or undertaking new initiatives, maybe as a not-for-profit or an individual looking to start up a other type of business or service. The province will also come and engage directly with council for certain things, whether that's land use planning or things like that, wildlife conservancy and things like that. There's also a number of committees. So council will establish committees on an annual or a per term basis. So their committee members are appointed by council. Sometimes they're residents, sometimes they're professionals in certain areas, and lots of times there will be council representatives appointed as well. So those occur outside of council's regular meeting schedule. And then there's portfolio assignments, which may not be quite as obvious as a direct council committee, but they are areas that you represent. So I'm going to pick on Deputy Mayor Gerwing, looks after the health portfolio and the seniors portfolio. So part of an environment, yes. holds a large yeah, amount of interests. But that means a lot of not only council committees, but you know, being accountable to those portfolios means attending groups in the community who represent those interests. So it's the Northern Rockies Senior Society board meetings, or the Lamplighters meetings, or Grace Manors meetings. It might mean being part of larger agencies in the province. So for health, for example, the Rural Health Network is a really awesome organization who advances rural health issues throughout the province. So participating in things like that, as well as there's member organizations we belong to, like the North Central Local Government Association. Those also, so participating mostly virtually, I'd say, but sometimes in person to take part and represent the Northern Rockies in those kind of venues. So that can take up a lot of capacity as well, in addition to conferences and seminars and workshops, whether that's to, again, represent the NRM, or it might be to advance kind of your own areas of interest as a local elected official. So some of that does involve travel. So we have a travel policy that covers off the expenses for doing that. But then the last bullet there is reading, more reading, as we've talked about. So in the kind of construct of time, this might be light in any given month, but we've estimated about 15 to 25 hours a month for kind of all of those things, meeting attendance, preparation for meetings, and then the other things in between. Again, it varies greatly. Like, I'm sure that is extremely light for Lorraine's time, considering how many portfolios you hold, but nonetheless, it's all relative. So each year we have 20 regular meetings. So they're scheduled annually, you know, in advance when they're occurring. But that might actually equate to something like 50 meetings a year based on kind of the additional ones that we schedule on those same dates and in between.
Not including.
Right, those are council meetings. Yeah. They vary in length. Pardon me. So we do recognize that you get consent by exhaustion. So the procedure bylaw limits time to it's 10 p.m., right? Or 9 p.m. 9 p.m. It was 10 and we were like 9 p.m. So anything beyond that, we recess and reconvene because, again, at 9 p.m. at night, people aren't thinking clearly. So we typically start at 5 p.m. and run through as long as the meetings take. So they can go a few hours in length. It was mentioned earlier, we do accommodate meeting attendance virtually. So that really surfaced through COVID, I think. I mean, we accommodated various ways prior to that, but obviously for reasons of the pandemic, it became really common for us to have hybrid meetings, but we still continue with that today. And as I mentioned, the 4 consecutive meetings is disqualification. So it can feel daunting. And I think, again, it's all relative to the amount of time that you're prepared to commit and the level of accountability, and then also the portfolio assignments that occur usually in your first few weeks of your term. So I've got a bit of an overview of our portfolios and committees. So these do change term to term. These are all of our portfolios and committees currently. So we have a number of standing committees. So those look after kind of areas of interest or area topics of kind of priority of council. So spans from public safety, health, environment, seniors, and these may get reorganized depending on the newly elected council and kind of the areas of experience that those folks represent. And then also where the priorities of that council end up falling as well. Reconciliation and inclusion is currently a portfolio, tourism, arts and heritage, agriculture and rural development, recreation and parks, and then education. From that, so those are kind of general areas of interest, and that may look different ways to whomever's holding that portfolio. But I mean, looking over that list, you know, there's lots of organizations in the community that represent those various kind of portfolio areas. So being connected with them and understanding what they're working on and what their challenges are is a big piece of representing that portfolio. And then council has appointed committees as well. So we currently have a community health plan steering committee, the Fire Smart and Resiliency Committee, the Environmental Advisory Committee, the Tourism Advisory Committee, and then it's sounding like potentially in the new term, an Agricultural Committee as well. And then there's a whole host of other appointments. So these are where the NRM has a representative on a board or an organization outside of our own. So the chamber, the museum, the public library, Phoenix Theater, Toad River Planning Advisory, and so on. So it's a big group. It's a big amount of groups to represent, but again, it also speaks to that connected community that I think the intention is to continue to support and build. And then one other thing that was a bit of a change in this term, but in past terms, we've had an acting mayor schedule. So essentially it was a rotating role of folks who, in the absence of the mayor, they would act in the role of the mayor during a meeting. And I think for many reasons, there was value seen in appointing a deputy mayor. So experience and strength in terms of chairing a meeting, as well as availability, unfortunately for you, were some good reasons that Deputy Mayor Gerwing was appointed for the last 2 years, I think. Yeah. So depending on how that rolls out for the next term, it may be either way, but that's something else that, especially if you don't have a lot of experience as chair, that might mean more time getting prepared for sitting in that role. And usually there's notice in advance if you will be having to chair a role as the acting mayor or deputy mayor. But it could mean just polishing up on the procedure bylaw and being well aware of what's coming on the agenda and foreseeing what might occur. So I think that's that. So next, kind of thinking about running. So maybe this is a little philosophical for folks, but I think it's really important to be super clear on your why when you are thinking about submitting nomination package. So some of these, it could be life-changing to become an elected official. It's going to definitely change the dynamic of your relationships. Sunday suppers are never going to be the same. Your grocery shopping trip will never be the same. But yeah, so some of the questions are just, what is your why? What is your why for running? What is your why for wanting to take on this commitment for the next 4 years, potentially? Your motivation is going to drive your campaign. So when you're talking to potential voters, when you're participating in the All Candidates Forum, when you're writing your campaign materials, it's going to be really important to be clear on why you're doing it. And there's going to be some challenges in the role through the course of the term. So being really true to why you did this in the first place is going to be important to think back on, probably more times than you'd like to admit. And yeah, are you prepared for that shift? So are you prepared to have potentially some of your relationships change? And is the time commitment something that is going to be feasible for you? Lives change and you never know what's going to come down the pike in the next 4 years, but I think being certain about what you can provide in terms of time and commitment at the outset is super important too. And it's not just the meetings, it's can you continue to be fully engaged with the community? Because you will get emails and visits from people that you probably never would have before. And then are you prepared to respond to those? And that's what we're here for too, is to support you and help you kind of navigate that. But there are certain times during the term that may become fairly daunting, depending on what the issues are at the time. So I think finding your voice. So you spoke a little bit about that as well. know if you want to.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that one. I mean, it took me quite a while to find my voice. I mean, that you're sitting around a council table with people you may or may not know, you may not like, you may or may not respect. And I remember my first term and it was like nobody spoke. It was just like, oh, staff would present the report and then there would be very little discussion and then we would vote. And I'm going like, wait a minute, like, I don't know everything. Like, I want to know what you are thinking, right? And it took a long time to figure out a way to get people to speak. And it is intimidating. It is intimidating to talk in front of people, for myself anyways, around the council table. And then in larger groups, I even find it even more difficult. But it's vital. If you're going to sit at the table, please find your voice and find it quickly. Be prepared to speak. So use whatever means you need. For myself, I write it out. And then sometimes I just read it out because I just am not always articulate. Like some people like can just like speak off the cuff. I'm not one of those people. So yeah. I'm getting better at it, but I did. I got my notes there. But yeah, I mean, please do what you need to do to be prepared at the table to speak. Give your opinion. It's vital for those making decisions that we have access to what's going on in the heads of all 7 people around the table. And just, yeah, going back to always be prepared. Please be prepared. And if not, own up to it.
Well, I like to add, there's a lot here and I know there's a lot to take in. But one of the things that we do also, especially to help with newly elected officials, is an orientation process. So as staff, we spend a lot of time, an effort to get you up to speed. We know as individuals, people have different ways to absorb information and to process information. So we respect that, and we do whatever we can to get you up to speed in a reasonable amount of time. It's not like, oh, by the way, here's the 30 days, boom, let's get everyone going. We literally probably spend the first 6 months, I'm going to say at least, doing some heavy lifting, working with, council as a whole, but especially with the newly elected councilors, our elected officials, to help get up to speed any history of things that occurred in the past, and even just understanding, the roles. There's LGLA, the Local Government Leadership Academy, has a conference that usually occurs around January, I think, the first year, for newly elected officials to attend a 3-day conference. So in the north, it's in Prince George. It's a really good conference. And we have lots of repeat elected officials go to that, just as a bit of a refresher also. It's a good networking and situation too, ability there too, or opportunity. So I just wanted to throw that out because listening to the discussions today the first time, it can seem overwhelming, and there is a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of effort put into providing as much information as we can and working either as a group or even individually, with new officials, elected officials, to get you as comfortable as you can and up to speed as into the term.
And part of that, we bring in some of our really trusted and helpful partners that deal with local governments across BC and Canada, for that matter, just to talk on specific topics and share kind of some experience from other communities that we hope that council finds helpful, just so that it's broadening your kind of exposure to that. This isn't just a Fort Nelson experience or problem. This is seen in other places, and these are some of the tools or resources that are available to kind of help navigate that. So we do an orientation over the course of a few weeks, but it's local information. organizational information, but then also kind of some of the tools and things that you'll need to perform the role effectively.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that during my first term, I had a previous counselor that wasn't sitting during that term, but I accessed my relationship with that counselor to help guide me through those first couple of years for sure. I'm very grateful for the person that took the time to help me through that.
So one thing that council will always be challenged with reflecting on is around conflict. So in terms of council, so conflict of interest is something that will always be a decision in each councillor's mind at the time of being faced with the decision at the table. So it's speaking generally to where there's a financial interest for you or for a member of your family in the decision that you're making. But that also can, I think, bleed a little bit into where you might be a member of a board of an organization and you have a responsibility as part of that appointment. So that's come up, unfortunately. So not that it's not a hard stop, but it's something that you probably want to think about before you consider your candidacy, just around, are there things that might limit what you can participate in meaningfully that because of a conflict of interest? And are there things that you need to change in advance of doing that? Or is that, you know, something that may or may not impact whether or not you run? Did you have a question, Kim? Okay, sorry. I saw the wheels turning there.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I was hesitating. This is no joke. And to anybody listening, been there, done that, considering it again, haven't made a decision. You guys aren't helping at all. It is no joke. You have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to go grocery shopping. It's not going to take you an hour and a half. It got to the point where Dave did the grocery shopping. I didn't want to go grocery shopping anymore because it took too long. If you've got kids, it's a struggle. Your kids need you, you know, and if you're doing the job right, you know, you're doing more of the council job than you are your regular job. If you have holidays at your regular job, you're probably going to use them all up because in travel. So those are all things that aren't necessarily on your screen, but I think are very, very important, you know, to consider. When I first did this, I was lied to. I admit it. I was lied to. It was sugar coated. And when I have people come to me and ask me, I don't sugarcoat it. I mean, I tell you exactly how much time it's going to be, and it's a lot, and your whole life is going to change.
Hopefully there will be some benefits in the life-changing experience as well.
It's rewarding. Don't get me wrong, but there is a component that you're missing, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, because once you're elected, and you know, a year down the road, you find, oh my God, I had no idea. It's too late, because if you stop, you know, there's a by-election. So once you're in, you're kind of in. Yeah. And it's not just for one term. Don't think you're doing this for one term, because you ask anybody that's done this, you're not going to get anything done the first term, and you automatically are guaranteed you're going to go a second term because you want to see everything that you've started finished. So in essence, it's going to be an 8-year commitment if you're elected, and not a 4.
And Kim never told me that way back in the day. Yeah, on occasion you look around your house and you walk in after, you know, the occasional evening meeting, and when you roll in about 9:30 and you think, oh, who lives here? Because we need to talk to the maid. But it is a lot, but it is very rewarding to see the initiatives and things that we start complete. That's the reward in the end, and yeah, I think it's worth it.
I mean, those of you that are on the board now are electing, do you all work full-time now, or most of you retired? Just curious.
I have a full-time job. I can actually say two because of my husband's company too. I'm his backhand, so.
The only reason I'm considering it is that I, do not work. And that became very clear, even talking to Lorraine, that, that would definitely be a hard no. I mean, you can't create time that you don't have. But I appreciate the honesty. Thank you very much, you guys. It's good.
It's a bit of a mixed bag from my experience when you look around the table from this council and previous councils, but typically it's about the same when you look at mixed bag. We've have anywhere from people who are retired that can provide more time, and that's the balance because you're part-time counselors, right? For lack of better words, it's not paying the bills if you're looking to right from a compensation perspective. Then you have some that might be self-employed or have flexibility, right? I can pick on Counselor Souls, for example. Has a level of flexibility, always farming, doing something, but has that little bit of flexibility. And you have some that have their full-time job. So we are cognizant of that, as Jay had said, when it comes to trying to meet for meetings and whatnot, to work around schedules. And we know when availability, that's why, if it's a daytime meeting, it's typically at noon, and we bribe counselors with lunch. I call it squishy triangle sandwiches from the grocery store. And then the balance as a staff perspective is that when we do evening meetings, if it's outside of a normal, I mean, then as staff, we're racking up additional time and bank time. But at the end of the day, we do what we can to try to accommodate council based on their schedules. I'll say that the people that sit around the table from elected official perspective have the utmost respect for them because of the time and dedication that they have for their community, because it can be a thankless position, right? Dealing with them one-on-one on a regular basis. I've been doing it for 9 years now. And prior to that, I was deputy CAO. You see the challenges of making those difficult decisions. You'll be put in positions where you're going to make a decision where it's a lose-lose, right? Because no matter which way you vote, the community can be divided. And that's where that credibility component comes in. And both Brendan and Lorraine brought it up today. It's around that consistency and the importance of making those decisions. But I have the utmost respect for the people around the table for the time commitment, the challenges, and that thanklessness that sometimes it could occur in terms of you walk out of here and the staff, we feel it too, right? We feel it when you walk out. And I don't grocery shop unless it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night myself. So, but we feel that because we know that we're presenting a report that is an extremely difficult position. Where we had, for lack of better words, the luxury of just preparing the report and saying, here's the options, right? And as staff, we come in with our own opinions, but we don't share them publicly. That's not our role. But we sit and we look at the dialogue, and I can say this for this council for sure, and previous councils that there's been great dialogue and respect at the table at times when those conversations or when different views and differing views, that creates good governance. And if you walk out the door, that's I've said excellent discussion, excellent dialogue, difficult decision. But then it's now when you go to the grocery store, you're challenged on that or questioned on that piece, right? On the flip side, though, if you look at the community, I look at what it looks like when I first started here as well, when I first came to this community 30 plus years ago, and what it looks like today. And a lot of the things in this community and the activities or growth changes to community are a result of decisions that have occurred at this table. Things like the health system initiative, which is basically, we have other communities that are copying what we're doing because we've led the way on that in terms of initiative. Things that at this table, ideas that have been just out of the box thinking. What's that? Verma composting, right? There's lots of things that, again, it's challenging. I'm not sure if the reward overwhelms the task to get to it, Kim. But I look at the benefits that the community have had, either just from a social perspective or even services in general, rec center, keeping affordability in mind and whatnot. that are at this table. So again, whatever turns your crank, but I have the utmost respect for the people who sit around this table because the time commitment is not something that's easy. You're not in it for the money, and you're here to represent your community, but the reward is what you see when you walk out the door, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I've done it both. My first term, I worked full time and then I was a counselor. But my second and my third term, I didn't have paid employment outside outside of my council duties. But I do have a home that I support, right? So I've done it both ways. And I think the biggest difference that I found, well, a couple of differences that I found is number one is the second and third term way more active because I didn't have that paid employment. But then on the flip side of that, there's that attitude, well, you don't work, so you have time, so you should do it. So for those people that don't have quote unquote paid work, just be really, really careful because that attitude is very prevalent. And you protect and I do have boundaries built in. But yeah, no, way more the second and the third term when I didn't have paid employment, way more involvement for sure. Yeah.
So I think two kind of last thoughts on this one. So one, and Councillor Enax mentioned Christina Benty, and she's a good friend and resource that we rely on a lot. But she talks a lot about what it means to run. She was a mayor for many years, and she supports councils now kind of as in a consulting role. But she talks about how easy it is to become vulnerable to what people think and say about you and the expectations that they have of you now that you've been elected. And so I think just part of that is or responding to that is staying true to your internal compass, the why you did this and what your other commitments are in your personal life to be able to allow you to be an elected official. And so, yeah, being clear on your boundaries and what's keeping your battery full and allowing you to show up and do the great work at the council table because you are doing these other things in your personal life, whatever that looks like. So yeah, just be prepared for that and kind of think about how you might manage that, I think, down the road. And then last is that just recognizing that every person that's elected has, unique skills and experience and talents that they bring, and they will likely have their own, things that are important that they really want to advance at the table, and being clear on what that is when you're running and through the campaign period, and then how do you leverage those among the folks that will surround you for the next 4 years, and finding how to collaborate and form a relationship, a positive working relationship to do good work. So yeah, please.
Just before we move on, I just want to figure out a system, an information management system for whatever works for you. Cause like I'm drowning and yes, I don't have a system that currently works. But so I'm always going like, Jaylene, I know it's somewhere, but I don't know, and Elaine, like I don't know where. Staff is a huge resource. But at the beginning, when you're elected, take the time to learn and practice the systems that the NRM has for information management. I cannot stress that enough. It will serve you well to do that right at the beginning. I did not. And plus our system changed in fairness. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. It's so much information and you'll go, oh no, I know we had this discussion, or this issue was whenever, but I just need to find that report and then to try to find it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of practice, and I would highly recommend that and maybe something will be an actual training session on accessing all of these electronic systems that we have for information management, I think, yeah, attend.
Okay, so campaigning. This is where our Deputy Chief Election Officer comes in.
Hello. So if running feels like the right next step, I'm going to give a couple practical pointers on how to navigate the campaign process. So the campaign period begins on September 19th and it'll go until general election day on the 17th. The financing reports for that must be filed with BC Elections BC between October 18th, so the day after general election, by January 15th. A lot of dates, there will be cheat sheets and stuff floating around that you can refer to. So some key compliance musts on this. Every campaign must have a financial agent, and that can be yourself, and that will be yourself unless you appoint someone. A separate campaign account must be opened before incurring any expenses, receiving any money in relation to the campaign, and all transactions must be paid for and deposited into this account. During the pre-campaign period, which began on July 20th, all third-party advertising rules apply, and majority must include an authorization statement. That includes the name of the financial agent and their phone number or email address or mailing address. Online advertising does not require this authorization if it includes a direct link to a website that has it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you explain that? I didn't understand.
It's just authorized by on the bottom of your.
But it only has to be there if you're attaching a link.
So it's third
It
party.
doesn't have to be there if it's online. And it's linked away to a spot that has your authorization statement.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, safer than sorry, yeah. The sponsorship contribution limits and rules for third party can be found on the notice of nomination, which was posted on our website. And there's a little button there on northernrockies.ca 2026 /2026 elections webpage. For any details or questions regarding the limits, you can contact Elections BC, and there is a phone number and email if anyone would like that. You can just reach out to us. So the fundamentals of a campaign: develop a clear, compelling message that reflects your priorities and resonates with residents. Attend community events and listen to and understand what the local needs are. Participate in the All Candidates Forum hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. It's usually beginning of October, just before advance election, I believe. And use a dedicated social media account if you can to share campaign updates and build excitement. And adhere to the signage regulations and follow them closely, which are on Elections BC website. I do have a few quick guides at the back there if anyone wants to grab them on their way out. Any questions?
I was just going to note, so there's been a bit of a mixed approach, I think, with folks who've been on council about whether they feature information about their campaign on their personal Facebook page or whether they create a dedicated counselor's page. It's really up to you, but it's easier. Should you not continue the term, or should you end after a 4-year term? It's hard to sever that if it's all combined on your personal page. So it's a matter of personal preference, but just some things to think about. And you may want to just kind of have a separate presence for other reasons, depending on audience and views and things like that. So just food for thought. Definitely not one way or the other, but I'd encourage you to talk to some other counselors or past counselors and see if they had a preference and maybe some of the reasons why they did it one way or the other.
that was the campaign basics. Now I'll get to how to submit your package. So where to get a package? If you haven't already, you can pick them up here at the municipal hall, or we can email them upon request to elections@northernrockies.ca. And I also have copies sitting right here that we can hand out if anyone's interested. So as far as the nomination package, all sections need to be completed. You may appoint a financial agent or act as your own, as I've described. You may appoint a scrutineer to observe on election days. And you must submit a statement of financial disclosure within your package. So how to submit would be to myself or to the municipal office. Or you can email them, sorry, in person at the office, or you can email elections@northernrockies.ca. All packages and documents must be received by September 11th. If you are unable to make that deadline and you get it to us via email by that date, just ensuring that you have original physical documents to us by the following Friday, September the 18th. If you're out of town or something along those lines. And that is also the deadline to withdraw. So if you change your mind after the nomination period ends, which is September 1st to September 11th, September 18th is the deadline to withdraw. If you need any help on how to submit the nomination documents or going through them, I'm in the office for majority Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, or you can reach out via email and we can set up an appointment. Any questions? And that email is always open, and myself or the chief officer will respond promptly. I also have some business cards along the back there with the take-home resources if you need them. And if you need anything or you have any questions, I'm not a public speaker and then shaking like a leaf over here, but I will get you the answers. Thank you.
So we just wanted to open it up at this stage to questions broadly. Any questions even following the session, feel free to reach out if it's specific to the election to elections@, but I think myself or Scott or Elaine or Deputy Mayor Gerwing or any of the members of council would be happy to answer questions and share thoughts on kind of what it means to be in the role. So yeah, open up to the floor, to our virtual attendees if there's anything that we haven't covered so far that's burning that you'd like to ask. Great, we did so well then. So if you bop ahead there, Alicia, 2 more. I kind of got ahead of myself with next steps and contacts, but I added a few additional resources. So I've looked back at these various things a few times. Christina Benti, as I mentioned, she has some great blog posts, and she has a document she calls The Joy of Governing. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, I got pulled up because
so she has an area on her website that's just a whole plethora of things that you can read and refer to, and she has some great TED Talks and YouTubes, whatever is your preferred method to digest. And so just really kind of firsthand experience about what it means and what you will come to expect. The government of BC has some stuff there about being an elected official. One note just around election signage. So there's kind of 2 pieces to consider. One is we have the Northern Rockies has a signage bylaw, which speaks about your election signs on municipal and private property. And then the province of BC has some rules around election signs on provincial rights of way, which is essentially our boulevards from 301 to the Muskwa Bridge. So just some things to think about there. And then, of course, our website, we've pulled some of this together there, not all of it. But then obviously that's the go-to place for your deadlines and dates and package resources and things like that. So we'll circulate this presentation by email if you'd like. Feel free to leave us with your info if you want a copy. It'll also be available on our website afterwards. We'll link it to our elections page and you can retrieve it there if it's something that you want to refer back to or share. Yeah, and that's all. Huge thanks for coming and chatting with us. And yeah. We said this is the first year we've done a candidate info session, and we were a little worried that it wouldn't be attended at all. So we're very happy with the turnout. So thank you. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a resource kind of for others too who may be considering it. So thanks.
Any feedback in terms of
Format.
format today? Yeah, because it was the first. Thank to this team, they did a phenomenal job, and